Morning, welcome back to another Gibbs adventure. Jim here, and I'm making up some wolf snares. And you're going to chuckle maybe a little bit depending on what type of style you use for snaring now, but snaring has really evolved in the last 10 or 15 years. And I kind of chuckled to myself when I first started out snaring wolves with one of my best friends, Kenny. We used to make our own locks and get scrap cable and make up, use copper ferrules and everything. Pieces of copper we'd cut and make ferrules out of them and everything. And today it's nowhere near that. The style that I try to use now is been developed by some really good trappers out in the West. Using kill springs, snare supports, barrel swivels, 2 different types of cable. And it becomes a lot more involved than what it was, but the harvest, the catch really makes a difference. So this is the basic snare that I use nowadays. It's basically a piece of 1/8 cable, or 1/8 cable, 4 or 5 feet, and then I make a snare from 3/32. That is basically, that's the size loop. It's about a 13-inch loop that I make. On it I have a kill spring and I have a snare support, and I'll show that later on out in the bush, how I hang my snares so that they're really solid. Okay, and this is what we call a kill spring. There's a couple of different guys that are making them now. Seneca was probably one of the first guys to come out with one. Since then it's evolved a little bit. They've gotten a couple of different sizes. So here's one of the original sizes that I bought from Marty a few years ago, and this is more of a magnum size I just bought from Corey. The idea behind it is once the animal is captured and it sets off, it puts an awful lot of pressure on the thing. And they come with little locks on them so that they actually are closed, and when the animal gets caught and sets it off, it puts a terrific amount of pressure around their neck. So they have like little locks that kind of go on them that make them work right. So I'll make up a couple of snares here, and I'll show you how I do it. Again, it's evolving. Some guys will probably laugh and say, you know, I can do this with just a lock and everything, but traditional snaring in my part of the world really depended upon a lot of entanglement to make sure that the animal went down. You ended up with sometimes not what we call waterheads, not the most desirable catch that you want. And like I said, it's evolved to now that when I use this sort of a setup, my misses and my catches are way more humane, faster, puts the animal down pretty quick. And I mean, that's the ultimate goal for us, is because we want to harvest an animal that's in the best shape possible. So that's where we're at nowadays. So I'll go through here a little bit. I've already pre-cut my cable, so I have 2 different sizes. I have 3/32. My cable's 4 feet long, so I'm about 50 inches or 54 inches of 3/32 cable, and about the same with the 1/8 cable. So when I make a snare, I make it up in stages. I'm going to make 2 here, so I have the parts on the table for 2 different snares. And I'll take a close-up of that before I get too far ahead of myself here. But the other thing is we have cam locks, and the other thing that we've learned to do to stop cable creep, where it slacks off a little bit, is to put teeth in the cam locks. So things have evolved quite a bit, but in my opinion, it's all for the better. I mean, I don't care what system you use, you're still always going to have problems with freezing rain. And this system has the same problems. I mean, it's not a magic bullet, but definitely in the right conditions, they put a wolf down really fast. So follow along here today, and I'll put one together. Hopefully I can talk enough to make sure it works so everybody will understand what I do. There's a couple of good tutorials that are online. Marty Seneca has them on, and Corey at Snare One has videos on how they put their snares together, and like I said, they really work. And my ultimate goal is not to have what we call a chew out, where the animal turns around and chews on the cable. My targeted species for me up here in the Timmins area is timber wolves. I'm not really looking for anything else, so I got to build a snare, and my timber wolves will run primarily from, say, a 50-pound range to over 100 pounds. So a 100-pound animal can put a lot of pressure on a snaring system, and any system in the world will always break at its weakest link. And the other thing I have to worry about here is the incidental catching of moose, and I have breakaways that we use to allow the mooses to be able to. They have so much power, they just rip their way out of it, and the breakaways will be the first thing that fail. They're designed to fail at a certain amount of poundage. So follow along, and here we go. These are the parts that are used. This is the breakaway, 3/32 cam lock, 3/32 cable, a piece of 1/8 cable, your lock, and your kill spring. Need a couple of 1/8 ferrules, and you need a couple of 3/32 ferrules, a barrel swivel, a snare support, and a flat washer to stop it from binding. So I'll put all these parts together, and that'll be what the snare is made up of. I have a bench swagger, so I'll show you quickly how. There's a couple of components that I'll put together pretty quickly here. So that's my lock and my breakaway. You can prepare those before you start into the cable. And the idea is to close it up. And again, this part is designed, it's called a breakaway for a reason. It's designed to break away at a certain amount of poundage if you get an incidental catch. And I'll put together a lock here. So the lock is designed, it goes on like so. Come on, Betsy. I'm gonna have one that's giving me, oh, because I'm trying to put the wrong one on the wrong one. There you go. Okay, so it goes around like so, comes up on the top. You have to have a set of pliers to set it. Okay, it's set. This is a slightly smaller one. It's a Alberta Power Snare number 2, and I gotta do this different. Okay. I'll take both of these. I'll start with the 1/8, just making a loop on one end. Now, just a little tip about this, the loop has to be big enough so that all the gear will pass through it when you put it onto a tree. Now, I always make sure I have a little bit of cable that passes through the loop to the other side through the ferrule. So meaning that there's a little bit of cable right there. And I just set it. You don't have to have a fancy bench swagger like I have here. You can do it with just a regular piece of steel and a hammer. But this kind of gives you a little bit more of a precision crimp to it. So the next step is to add the other end, and that's where I add the barrel swivel. Those are number 8 barrel swivels. Again, I like this to have a little piece of cable that comes through, not a lot, but just enough. Too much and they fray and get caught in everything, and not enough, they go slip back inside. So I always try to pay attention to that. Alright, so the first part of my snare is together, so my loop and my barrel swivel. Next thing I put together here is going to be my 3/32 cable. Put the ferrule on first, thread it through the barrel swivel, give her a little kink here. Again, make sure you have a piece coming through. If you think your loop's a bit too big, you can shorten it. Alright, so my snare is roughly, with the two pieces, 7 feet long. This is a very important step. My snare support, go down there, my snare support has to go on next. So it's a comb, and the bigger part of the comb has to go towards the barrel swivel. You just slide it on for now and forget about it. Next, my lock goes on. And the way I kind of keep track of it is the action, the head of the lock, the top of the lock goes down towards the barrel swivel, or towards the other end. Okay, next I feed my cable through the other end of my loop, like so. I take my lock, my kill spring here, sorry, not a lock, but kill spring, add on a piece, my barrel, my flat washer. Now this washer, the reason for this washer is important because you don't want it to bind anywhere on the end of the swivel. Now there's two ways to do this end. What I've learned over the years, because I've lost some wools having the single ferrules blow off, is I take a double ferrule, feed it in, and again same thing, I just lock it, bring it around. Like so. Have a little piece come through. Make sure I have the ferrule in the right groove and compress it. And there you go. So there's one snare made up. When I'm done, I always check them to make sure the action on the thing is proper. But there you go. I use a 1x19 cable. I like it the best because it gives a kind of a better loop. 7x7, a lot of guys like it, but I find for my own personal taste, it makes too droopy a snare. And you'll see. And then when the animal gets caught, this spring will fire. And the old, the old trick where we used to lock it onto our wrist and fire it off. Well, I don't do it with one of these because I'd have to cut it off with cable cutters. That's how much pressure's on there. This snare support screws onto a piece of wire like so, and the big end has to be towards the barrel swivel like so. So there you go, one ready to go. Some guys will make larger loops. That's up to you. So whatever you prefer with. I'm trying to target a wolf so that he's caught by the head, by the neck, as high as possible. And I like to stay away from too big a loop. I have some snares that have big loops, but I'm trying to standardize everything. And the reason for that is I want to try to target a neck catch. And the higher up in the neck, the better the catch is going to be. Okay, so I'm going to put together, this is a Seneca power snare. The lock on it goes slightly different than a snare one does. It goes on the cable instead of going on the spring itself. So I'll make one of those up, but it's still the same step. I take my 1/8, I start with my 1/8. Make a loop. Okay, so again, critical that this spring can fit through there when it's closed. Otherwise you're not gonna like me. Just a tip for you. Okay, take my barrel swivel. Make sure a little piece comes through. Okay, so those, I'm gonna use my 3/32 cable here. First thing I have to do, put my ferrule on, feed it through the barrel swivel so the two pieces will connect. Now you're going to notice working with 1x19 over the 7x7 is that the 1x19 is a much stiffer cable, so it's harder to close that loop at the end of the ferrule. So I'm talking about this little loop here at the end here. It's harder to make a very compact small loop. You can do it a lot easier with 7x7. Okay, so that's put together. I'll leave that below me. The next step is to put on the snare support. Now there's a number of different ones out there. Through trial and error, I've really ended up on this type of wire one. But I'll tell you a secret. You can't put it on after if you miss it. If you screw up and don't put it on at the right time, you can't get it on. So you're going to cut that ferrule and redo it. So the lock goes on. Cable comes through the lock. Now with Marty's system, you put on your spring. Next, okay, you add on your lock. Got to make sure your lock is going up the right way. So they call this an Alberta, this piece here, an Alberta power snare. It allows you to. Of course, I got to throw it on the floor. Where did it go? I'll have to edit that piece out. Okay. Goes in the end like so. Next, you have to add your washer, flat washer. So I'll get all my pieces here together so you can see this. Okay, and close up the end, and again you're going to find with 1x19 that it's harder to get a very small loop on the end. Alright, closed up properly. So the only difference with this system here is that now I'll take my setters, load the spring up, it's on like that. So again, once I'm all done here, I always like to make sure that the lock is in the right direction and it's going to lock. I've had snares come that are put on backwards. There you go, another one ready to go. So hopefully that'll help you. The idea is to have all your parts ready ahead of time, and then once you're done, I don't bother, I work with my hands. I don't really bother boiling my snares or anything. I figure a couple days out in the wild that the smell's gone. I don't find I get refusals from that. I get refusals if I lose a wolf, so if he gets caught and gets out of it, then I'll get a refusal. The next time he comes by, he doesn't want to get caught. Working with my hands, sometimes I have to wear gloves because it's so cold out, but most of the time I'm going to set everything with my hands, and I figure within a couple of days the smell is going to spread off. There's wire everywhere in the bush, so I don't think you can hide the smell of steel. But like I said, the trick is to get them the first time and not miss them. Use good equipment. If you have a blowout, if you lose them, then try to figure out why did it break? What was the failure? My system that I have arrived at here is because I've had lost wolves. So why I'm using a piece of anchor cable and a barrel swivel and a spring is because I don't rely on entanglement. Entanglement makes the wolf has to decide he wants to get tangled up. If he wants to just stand there and chew, he can chew his way out. With this system, every minute that he's in the thing, as soon as he closes it and sets that spring off, then it becomes a lot more lethal for him. Which kind of makes a funny subject because, you know, the public has a viewpoint of trapping that it has to be humane and more humane and more humane. But if you catch an incidental catch in this, the snare's going to do its job, so they become lethal snares. So kind of a pitfall if you're going to operate where there's going to be domestic dogs. I don't worry about that where I trap. My trap lines are way out in the bush, but the potential is still there for somebody to be out in the bush with their dog and letting their dog run around, and without a pair of cable cutters like so, you know, they're probably not going to get that dog out of that trap in time or that snare in time. So just a pitfall for lethal snaring. This is what I mean about your loop at the end here has to be able to pass through. So if you make this loop at the end too small, then you can't get the gear through. And I've had situations where I'm not able to, and I'll separate this here a little bit, bring the lock through first. Okay, and then I'll get the spring through. Well, maybe I'll do it the other way around here. I'll bring the spring through first. But this, you can see how I'm struggling with this a little bit. I have to be able to get this spring through the loop. I have to wrap this around a tree. So this has to go through. And believe me, when one of these things go off on your fingers, it's not fun. And they will do that. Okay, so then now it'll close up around the tree. So that's what I mean by having that loop at the end here big enough so that this stuff will slide through. So that's important. There you go. Hopefully you enjoy this one. Leave me some comments there about my method, and I'll add a section to it about how I hang them up in the snare using the snare support and some heavy wire. Thank you.